Welcome to the Healthy Leader Podcast, where we explore mindset, habits, and self-leadership so that you can lead a healthy and fulfilling life while also leading others better. Hello, hello, hello. I hope that you are creating a very, very healthy day. I just got back from a beautiful Easter celebration with my family, and it was really meaningful. What I love about Easter is that it means something a little bit different to everybody. So some people in my family were deep in the tradition of it, going to Mass, doing the rituals, and having just this very strong reverence over the religious meaning. And then others were all about the Easter bunny and the peeps and the baskets and just getting together. And I love that. I love that the same day can hold all of that. For me, one of the things that I carry from this time of year is this idea that even in the most difficult of circumstances, there is always the possibility of rising again, of becoming more, of closing the gap between what is happening and who we are right now and who we know that we can be to our potential. And at The Healthy Leader, we talk about that potential in a very specific way, and that is in terms of your vision, cultivating a very clear picture of who you want to be and using that as your anchor, especially when things get hard. So Easter is one of those natural times when I stop and I ask myself, am I rising up to my vision? Am I actually living from that vision? And how can I level up? How can I rise up a little bit better? And they say you get what you ask for, because immediately I got the opportunity to notice where I was not rising up. So here is that story. I have been invited to an event this summer that I am genuinely excited about. And even though it's going to be a travel and logistical challenge, to say the least, I said yes to this invite because I felt that it was really important to support this person and this cause and to celebrate with them. And I knew it would be an amazing opportunity to do just that. And then I got an email. And when I read that email, I learned that someone else is going to be there, somebody that I have history with. And I had given a lot of thought to my boundaries and my relationship with them, and had consciously decided that I was not going to have a relationship with them and that I was not going to spend energy or time with them. And I thought that I had healed myself around this situation. And yet, when I read that email, I was like, no. My stomach dropped. I could just feel the anxiety rising within me. And immediately my mind started reeling. I was like, okay, is there another way that I could fulfill this obligation? How can I get out of this? Can I show up for this person and this cause that I care about without actually having to be in that room? And as I'm thinking these thoughts, I can feel the butterflies in my stomach. I can feel that my heart is starting to beat a little bit faster. And I am in a moderate level of stress. And then, of course, I think, wait, why am I feeling so distressed about this? I thought I had already handled this. I thought I had managed this. And so then I was able to calm down a little bit, and my brain went to, hey, remember who you are. You said you want to rise up, to show up. So be your vision, Traci. Be the person who keeps your commitments, who shows up graciously and positively with all of who you are. And be there in that room with all of your energy focused on the meaning of that event. And do not worry or give 1 ounce of energy to anybody else. So for a moment, I am calm and ready to rise up. I remember who I am, and I am back to center. And then somewhere along the line, I found myself thinking, can you believe that? Why are they going to be there? Maybe they'll cancel at the last minute. And then my brain can go down that path. And then at some point, I recognize that, oh, I'm doing it again. I'm spending energy that I do not want to spend on this scenario. So then I get to consciously shift back, repeat my vision statement again. And that process will repeat itself, and I get to keep doing that work unless at some point I intentionally use this negative energy as a way for me to rise up literally to another level, so that when I receive a similar email in the future, I do not respond in a negative way. I give less and less negative energy to a scenario that I would not prefer. And that whole process is what we're going to explore a little bit today. The email story is a super simple example of the paradigm of fear and love. That's a high level way to describe being in a negative state, which we are going to define as fear, and then also being able to bring a more positive state that we're going to define as love to that same moment. Now, I know that we don't generally talk about fear and love in this way. It may feel either a little soft or melodramatic, but bear with me here, because what was happening in that moment that I just described is what I talk about with many of you. You're going along, everything is fine, and then something hits. There's an emergency, some kind of fallout, an unexpected delay, or someone or something is just really annoying you. And suddenly you're in this space where you're having this split experience of, on one hand, you know how you want to handle the situation. You know what the best version of you would do, what the leader in you would do. And then on the other hand, you want to run for the hills or hide or hope the situation just goes away. And this shows up in low stakes situations like the email this morning, and also in much higher stakes. I was just working with someone who gave me permission to share this, and she is a cardiac surgeon, has extraordinary skills, and loves what she does. She came to me with a scenario that she was not proud of. And the story is that a family had come in hoping for surgery for their loved one who was in a very serious condition. And so she responded to this emergency and evaluated the patient and realized that this patient's numbers did not meet the threshold of doing an operation. This patient would not survive surgery. And this was a difficult call for her to make. She made the decision. It was very courageous. And she stood by that decision. She knew that that was the right medical decision. But what she was not happy with was that when the cardiologist who was managing the family's care called her and asked her to come sit with them, not to change her medical decision, but just to sit with the family and to be present and to communicate with them the reasoning behind this decision and how the decision was made, she told them no. She said, I'm not the one who needs to be providing moral support right now. And instead, she sent a resident who had been in the role for less than a year. And when we talked about it, she said, that was not the right call for me to make. I wanted to be the type of leader that would show up in that room. And I knew that if I went into that room, that I would feel their desperation and that I would want to reverse my medically sound decision. And I didn't trust myself enough to know that I would do that. I was afraid that I would cave in and tell them that I would do the operation. So I knew that I should have gone, but I couldn't. And so I sent somebody else. So this is a great example of somebody who nails the expertise, but doesn't show up, doesn't rise up in the way that they know that they are capable of. She let her fear lead her decision. And as we talked about it, she realized that she had never been taught in medical school or in any other place in her life how to simultaneously feel anxiety like this and then still do the right thing. And that right there is the gap that this work is all about. It's not about the expertise. It's about the leadership, and specifically self-leadership. It's about me today at my desk. It's about the executive who can't bring themselves to have the difficult conversation with the person who's undermining their team. It's the parent who knows that they need to set a boundary with their adult child, but they keep finding reasons to just put it off and wait. Lots of different situations, different scenarios, but there is a gap between who we know we want to be and what we actually do when fear is running the show. So I want to offer a lens for all of this, a way to recognize what's really happening in these moments, both quote unquote big and small moments, and understand where they are rooted and use those moments as a doorway to rising up, to leveling up, rather than being run by it. Moments as a doorway to rising up, to leveling up, rather than being run by it. To rise up and level up, rather than being run by them. So I want to start with this idea that there really are only two key emotions, love and fear. And this is not my idea. It's not a new idea. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who, if you don't know, is a psychiatrist who spent her career sitting with people at the end of their lives, and she said that there are essentially only those two emotions, love and fear, and that all positive emotions come from love, and that all negative emotions come from fear. So when we're feeling positive emotions, connection, gratitude, happiness, that those are really all just different forms rooted in the base emotion of love. And then when we are feeling agitated, resentful, angry, or guilty, or any negative emotion you can think of, that the base of those emotions is fear. And what we want to zero in on is that at any given moment, the idea is that you are in only one of those two states. You are either in fear or you are in love. You're always in one or the other. And whichever one you are in is the state that is most likely going to run your decisions and your actions and influence how you're going to show up in that moment. Now, I also want to ground this in biology because it's not just philosophy. When fear fires in you, it fires fast before your conscious brain can keep up. Your amygdala takes over, cortisol floods your system, and you go into survival mode. So you fight, or you flee, or you freeze, or you fawn, which means you people please, you accommodate, you make the threat go away by making everyone around you comfortable. So your body in this state thinks that you are in danger. It doesn't matter that you are just standing at your desk reading an email. The lower brain is running the show, and it is a fear-based response. Then on the other side, the love state, or what I also like to call the leader state, your prefrontal cortex comes back online. You feel steady and grounded and open. You can think, you can listen, and you can lead. And I want to bring in something here that makes this concrete. The HeartMath Institute has been researching the connection between our emotions, our hearts, and our performance for over 30 years. And they have over 500 peer-reviewed studies. And what they found is that the heart actually sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. And when we are in a state of care, gratitude, love, our heart rhythm patterns become smooth and coherent. Our thinking is clearer. Our emotional stability increases. And that state of being is contagious. And I share that because that is powerful. The idea of talking about love in a professional setting isn't soft, it's measurable. It makes you more effective. It helps you to rise up to your potential. And here is what's really fascinating about this. You cannot fully hold both states at the same time. The biology just does not allow it. When fear is running the show, love is not. And when love is running the show, fear is not. But you can move between them very quickly. Sometimes it's so fast that you don't even notice it's happening. It just feels like confusion. And that toggling isn't failure. It's your brain doing its job. And the more that you practice choosing love, bringing that positive energy into the moment when fear fires, the stronger that circuitry becomes. So you're not just feeling better in that moment. You're not just even changing your behavior. You are rewiring your brain. Now, you may have heard of the idea of letting go of fear, and I love that concept. And what I have found is that fear does not always let go on demand. What we can do is learn to move with it, to feel it, and to still choose our version of love anyway. That's a little bit different than letting go. It's a little bit more honest, and it brings a little bit more awareness to this moment. And the ability to recognize the fear and then to move forward with love is what we would call courage. Now, courage comes from the Latin cor, C-O-R, meaning heart. And in its earliest forms, courage didn't mean fearlessness, meaning you don't have fear. It meant acting from the heart even when fear is beating really loudly. And courage is the ability to do that, to act from a place of love, to act from a place of honor, to act from a place of determination and persistence and any other emotion that will move you forward in a positive direction to help you to rise up and be the person that you want to be and take the action that you want to take. And I want to say something about what courage actually looks like, because we think it's running into a burning building, that big dramatic moment. And that is true. It is also true that courage happens in the quiet moments. It happens when you don't want to walk into that patient's room and you go anyway, when your stomach drops and you show up for the event anyway, when you're annoyed and you choose grace instead. That space between feeling the fear and choosing love anyway, that is where leadership actually lives. That is the leader in between. And I think it's helpful to clarify that fear is not our enemy, even though it can feel like it for sure. We need fear. It is the mechanism that helps us to stay alive and to help other people do the same. And it does what it was designed to do. It helps us to move very quickly when we need to. If we see a child struggling in the deep end of the pool, if we need to quickly hit the brake before we've even consciously registered that the car in front of us is stopping. So the amygdala isn't broken. In fact, it's brilliant, and we need it. And our challenge is that our brains cannot tell the difference between that physical threat and the need for survival and a social threat. It can't tell the difference between a predator and an email, between the cave and the conference room. So when we feel fear, we feel it viscerally in our bodies when very often we are completely safe. That's the experience that I had earlier this morning. I could feel the fear rising, but I was in a temperature-controlled environment, standing in the exact same place and in the exact same environment that I was the moment before I had read that email. There's an interesting acronym for fear that maybe you have heard, and it is false evidence appearing real. That's what we're talking about here. That's why it is so difficult to shift our brains when we know that we truly are not in a survival situation. It's not because we are weak or irrational, but it's because the signal in our body feels like a real threat. And for our nervous system, it is a real threat. And psychologists have identified two key fears that we are born with. One of them is falling, and the other one is loud noises. And you can see those in any newborn. Their little arms are shooting out, or they're startled, or they start to cry. Though interestingly, even those are now being questioned. Some researchers believe that those just might be reflexes rather than true fears, which means that we might not be born with any fears at all. Either way, the point is the same. Every fear that we carry as adults is learned. It's learned over time through our experiences, our culture, the stories that we were told, the stories that we repeat in telling to ourselves. And that means that most of the fear running our lives right now is not original equipment. It is acquired. And what can be acquired can be unacquired, as in unlearned. And that means that we can train ourselves to feel those fears, experience those fears, and instead of reacting, we can choose to respond differently. Elite units do not train to be fearless. They train so that fear stops being the one driving the truck. Special operations training exposes you to what you fear over and over until your nervous system learns to function under the pressure instead of panicking, so that when the real moment comes, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. And inside those teams, there is a secondary layer, this foundational layer of the shared struggle and the tight bonds that literally change the chemistry in the people on these teams. They have oxytocin running through their bodies and establishing this tight cohesion that make them care more about the person standing next to them than about their own fear. So the bottom line is that fear is always going to report for duty. But the question is, what and who have you trained to be in the midst of it? So I want to emphasize here that love is not just a feeling, it is truly a force. Love of country, love of family, love of mission. These are not small forces. They are some of the greatest forces of all. And they are the reason that people do the hardest things imaginable. This is the power of love. When I had the opportunity to be in the same room with Alan Mulally, who is the CEO who brought both Ford and also Boeing back from the brink, when he shared his leadership deck, right smack dab in the middle of his leadership lessons is a big red heart. And his message was, you have to love your people. He went right for that core emotion. He told the story of how he said to his team at the very beginning, I love you guys. I don't want to date you, but I love you. This is not soft. He was describing a force that would hold that organization together through one of the most difficult turnarounds in corporate history. So when we tap into love, when you're tapping into love, it's something that is also visceral. And when you're in that space, that is when respect and honor and support and communication and collaboration manifests. So love is not soft, it's powerful. And some would say, and I would agree, that it is the most powerful force of all. So this begs the question, how do you bring courage into those fear-based moments? How do you feel that fear and then bring love alongside it through courage? So what I want to do is offer you a process to do that. And I want to name the intention clearly. Again, the goal is not to eliminate the fear, but to recognize it, get curious, use it to grow and to evolve. So the first step is to recognize the fear, to recognize when you are in a fear state. And you do that by learning what those negative emotions actually feel like in your body. For me, and I described this earlier, it was a heavy and hollow feeling at the same time. I could feel my heart rate increasing very rapidly. I felt this pit in my stomach. My shoulders were tight. My mind started to kind of spin in circles. That's a signal. That's my signal. And you have your own. So start to listen to it. Listen to your body. Learn what it feels like when you feel stressed or when you're angry or when you're upset or when you're guilty. See what that feels like in your body, because you can't work with what you can't feel. So that's the first step, is to start to recognize that fear response and however it manifests for you. The second step is to get to the root of that fear, to try and figure out what it's trying to tell you. One simple way to do this is to start by asking that Socratic one-word question, why? Why is this bothering me? Or why am I feeling this emotion right now? And then you simply keep asking some version of why and why does this matter until you get to the root of it, which is, spoiler alert, almost always tied to some version of I'm not enough, I'm trapped, I don't have control, I'll be exposed, I can't handle this. I'm going to lose what I have. It could be money, relationships, identity, and status. All of these are just different flavors and some variation of the primal fear of I am not enough, which is totally related to your identity and to your sense of belonging. And if you're not enough and you don't matter, you probably aren't safe. You might get kicked out of the tribe, and now you are in primal fear. That's how we get to the root of our annoyances in traffic or at our desk, or even to those bigger fears that we're facing. So my recommendation is to simply start with small situations, with subtle annoyances or pet peeves, because that can be your training ground. So as an example, right now, if you think of some of your own pet peeves, what gets under your skin a little bit, but that's not that really big of a deal. It could be the toilet paper on the wrong way, or people with 15 items in the 12-item grocery lane. Whatever it is, bring something to mind. One of the great pet peeves to work with is traffic, especially when you are in bumper-to-bumper traffic and you need to be somewhere. So I actually just worked with someone on this recently. We were in a group coaching session and this topic came up, and he described the scene that you probably are pretty familiar with. There was construction or an accident ahead and the far right lane was closing. And then one driver zoomed down the right lane all the way to the front and then squeezed his way in at the top. And the gentleman who is telling this story is visibly upset. And he was talking about how unfair it was, and also at the same time how he totally did not want to be bothered by it, but that he still was. So with his permission, I coached him and asked him, okay, so why were you so upset? And he said, because it's not fair. They didn't wait like everybody else. And then I asked the second why. Why does it matter if it's not fair? And he said, because if cutting in line works, if the person who doesn't follow the rules gets the same result or better results than the person who does, then doing the right thing doesn't even matter. Then my third why question was, well, why does it matter that doing the right thing might not matter? And he looked down and paused and he said, why does that matter? He's like, I'm not really sure, but maybe it's because that might mean that my values don't matter. And this is where it gets real, right? Because now we're not talking about traffic anymore. We're talking about values. We're talking about identity. And now we're in the ballpark to get real and to focus on what does matter and to look at the situation with a broader lens, with, if you will, a lens of love. But to do that, we got to get out of our own huff about what is going on. And to do that, it takes courage. It takes feeling this negative energy and then at the same time being willing to notice that energy, to notice our own judgment, to notice our own resistance, and to be courageous enough to see what else is available, to see, yes, drum roll, the love even in this situation, to see what we have within us to rise up and to meet the distress, the irritation, the anxiety, the guilt, whatever it is. And that brings us to the third step, which is to find the courage, to find the core, to find the powerful heart of who you are, to find that felt emotion that will help you lean into your best self. And again, this is not an easy feat. It sounds very simple. I put it in this 1, 2, 3 process, but it takes practice because when we are in those moments, it is visceral. We are in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So to get out of that, we have to override our own brains. We have to move from that fear into something else. And that's exactly where the courage lives. So in the traffic example, that looked like reckoning that if his values were fairness and doing the right thing, then the way that he could live that was to give that right lane driver the benefit of the doubt, to recognize that we had no idea what was going on in that driver's mind or in that car. And even can we stretch it as far to send love, to send some good wishes, to hope that he is doing okay. And when we do that, we totally shift that energy. For me and the event coming up, courage looks like recognizing that discomfort, figuring out that what is really going on for me is me underestimating my own value and getting back into recognition of all of the gifts and the graciousness and the excitement and the passion that I have to give, and that I don't want to waste any of my energy doing anything else besides that. Now, I would love to say that I'm 100% there, that I have risen up through this particular scenario, but that's not true. I am still in the practice. And that's what this is. It is a practice. It is the practice of 1, noticing your fear, 2, getting to the root of it, so that then 3, you can arm yourself with the power of love as you courageously move through it. This looks like the executive who feels the urge to control the room, who can then notice the tension in their body and choose curiosity instead of shutting people down. This is the parent who is overwhelmed and reactive, who pauses long enough to reconnect and love and respond from that place instead of snapping. This is the team member who's worried about looking stupid and feels that fear and then asks the question anyway. I know that some of you are not dealing just with a pet peeve or a difficult email, but that you are in something that is genuinely very hard for you right now, a diagnosis, a loss, a situation that feels impossible. And what I want you to know is that even there, love is present. You are not abandoned to the fear. The capacity to bring love into it, even just for one breath or one moment of grace towards yourself, that is always available. You are never so far into the fear that love cannot find you. That's what rising again actually means. Not the absence of the hard thing, but the choice to bring love into it anyway. That is the Easter message that I am carrying with me, and it is the one that I want to leave you with today. So let's remember this together, that the leader between fear and love is not someone who has conquered fear. It's someone who has learned to stand in that space, feel it fully, choose love anyway, over and over, in the small moments and in the big ones too. That's the leader in between. And that leader, I truly believe, is you. Hey there. If you are ready to level up in how you lead yourself and how you lead others, come visit us at thehealthyleadergroup.com and see what's new at the intersection of your health and well-being and your leadership.